were taken to be genuine in every detail. But in modern times, the literal accuracy of the text has been questioned. Many believe that the stories are symbolic. The meanings are enshrined in truth, but the details are sometimes exaggerated or embellished. But maybe the words of the scriptures are more accurate than some now believe. Our ancestors had a surprisingly advanced understanding of science and the world around them. Ancient discoveries will use this knowledge not to prove or disprove the text, but to discover whether the fantastical details of the Bible are scientifically possible. It's a journey that begins literally at the height of ancient architecture. It was believed to be the largest building ever erected, a tower so high it may have reached heaven itself. But the people who built it defied God.
God saw what was happening. This was an evil plan. It was not going to benefit society in the long run.
So according to Scripture, God intervened.
People started to speak different languages. They started to argue with each other. And the disunity caused them eventually to disperse, and the tower came crumbling down.
It was called the Tower of Babel, and some believe it really existed. Today, the world's tallest building, the Burj Dubai, is over 2,000 feet high. But what if science could show that the Tower of Babel could have been even taller?
The Tower of Babel was just like one of the skyscrapers that we have today in our cities. You know, often the top of it is covered by cloud.
They said it's so large it reaches heaven.
Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens. Modern historians and archaeologists believe this story to be an exaggeration. But what if science could prove that the ancients really did have the technology to build such huge constructions? The key is to test ancient materials and architectural techniques to show their limit. Using information directly from the pages of the Bible itself, researchers will use modern science to calculate how high the ancient engineers really could have built.
The story says that when they came to build the tower, they used the brick.
So how tall could an ancient brick building have been?
If one wanted to figure out how tall a building you could build with a brittle material like bricks, you can get a rough idea of this by calculating the weight of one brick and then figuring out how many bricks you could pile on before it starts cracking unacceptably and falls apart, so your foundation starts crumbling.
So the first step in this investigation is to reproduce an ancient brick. Lynn Hobbs is a professor of materials science at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He is making a sun-baked brick out of clay, using the same technique as 3,000 years ago. Straw and sand are added, which binds the clay together, strengthening the resulting brick.
The next stage is to dry it out. And the easiest way to dry it out is just leave it in the sun. And then the brick gets hard.
To calculate the maximum height of a building made up entirely of these sun-baked bricks, you need to find out the strength of a single brick. To do this, Professor Hobbs is using an Instrom machine. This crushes the brick in a steel press until it breaks.
The maximum load that this brick sustained was 800 pounds. And that's over 2 square inches.
This is the crushing weight that a single brick can withstand vertically.
So that means that a brick laid down could take 800 times 5, or 4,000 pounds.
Each brick weighs 1 pound, so they can be piled 4,000 bricks high.
So if we have 4,000 bricks, each 1.25 inches high, that equals 500 feet.
A 500-foot structure is as tall as the Washington Monument. But archaeological evidence suggests that the Tower of Babel could have been even taller. The story is set in ancient Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq and Syria, a land that still today has ruins of ancient megastructures called ziggurats. Ziggurats were the skyscrapers of ancient Mesopotamia. On their tops, temples were built which were believed to be the dwelling place of the gods. The dozens that still stand today have been dated by archaeologists to be from the same era as the story of the Tower of Babel.
They were created first around 2000 BC.
The ziggurats still stand today because of their very strong pyramidal structure.
Well, the ziggurats are part of a very ancient tradition, and so the people of ancient Iraq were very experienced in dealing with the materials for the platform. They understood that the increasing weight of these platforms needed spreading of the load.
Buildings with a wide base, like the Great Pyramids at Giza, spread the load better than straight towers. This makes them more stable and therefore able to be built taller.
A pyramid could be built 3 times higher than the tower. And if we take 500 feet and we multiply that by 3, we could actually have a 1,500-foot pyramid built out of sun-baked brick. 1,500 feet is more than a quarter of a mile. That's pretty amazing for a bunch of clay that you've dug out of the ground.
So using sun-baked bricks in a ziggurat shape, they could have built 1,500 feet high. That's more than the height of the world's tallest brick building today, the Chrysler Building. But amazingly, the Tower of Babel could have been even taller. There was a new and revolutionary technology so important, it is even mentioned in the pages of the Bible itself. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly."
That treatment of burning the brick changes its properties quite drastically. It makes it much stronger.
Firing the brick at 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit for 24 hours, like the Mesopotamians would have done, causes the clay particles to stick together. This results in a more consolidated and stronger material. But just how much stronger, and therefore how much higher, could the Tower of Babel have been, using this new technology of fired brick? The sun-baked brick failed with 800 pounds of weight. The fired brick should be much stronger.
We already have 1,000 pounds on the brick, much more than we had on the sun-dried brick. You can see it's starting to crack at about 2,000 pounds. Now we're up to 5,000. Almost 6,000 pounds. The strength. There we go. As you can see, it almost exploded.
At 6,000 pounds, this means the fired brick is 7.5 times stronger than the sun-baked brick. Professor Hobbs is using these new results in the same calculation to find out just how high the ancient Mesopotamians could have built.
That's 2 miles. So in principle, using fired brick, we could build a pyramid 2 miles high, well up into the heavens.
Astonishingly, this is nearly 5 times higher than the world's tallest building today. So in theory, it is possible that the ancient Mesopotamians really could build into the heavens, so high they would actually have suffered altitude sickness. But in practice, could they really have had the resources to do so?
Even though theoretically we could have a 2-mile-high ziggurat, it would have been impractical because the fired brick consumes so much energy to produce.
We understand the story of the Tower of Babel to have actually happened. Just look at any skyscraper in a metropolis and you'll see great towers reaching up to the heavens.
Can modern analysis of biblical text also shed new light on one of the most famous stories ever told? That of the shepherd boy David, who single-handedly killed the giant Goliath and revealed the weapon and technique deadly enough to bring down a giant in a single blow. It is one of the most famous underdog stories ever told. An attacking force armed with technologically superior weapons is led by a giant warrior feared by all. He is brought down by just a stone, hurled by a boy named David. With a sling and a stone, David smote the Philistine giant.
David not only defeated Goliath, but defeated the Philistines, and by defeating the Philistines was actually the motivating force for the beginning of the history of Israel.
How difficult would it have been for a boy to strike and kill a giant with just one accurate blow?
The sling is the great ignored and underrated weapon of the ancient world. It's very cheap, it's the weapon of poor people, but it was incredibly effective.
As two great armies stood facing each other on the edge of battle, why was a boy matched up against a giant? It was the 11th century BC, and the people of Israel were confronted by their enemies, the Philistines.
The Philistines came from the area of the Aegean Islands, equipped with the most modern technological weapons against a very small, minor nation.
The Philistines' champion, Goliath, was covered in an armor of bronze.
He had a tremendous amount of armor, which when we actually weigh by the that which is mentioned in the Bible, will come close to 125 pounds. So you see this unbelievably large, monstrous creature.
When Goliath offered to settle the battle by a single combat, David stepped forward. But David was not just any boy. He would become King David. After Jesus, his is the most complete biography in the Bible.
I think that David had a plan because, as he mentions to Saul, I can handle Goliath just as I've handled the bears and the wolves that have attacked my flock. My flock now is the Israelite army. My weapon is the slingshot. There is the wolf and the bear.
Ancient discoveries will use modern technology and clues from the Bible itself to discover David's technique. First, we must find the perfect sling for one-to-one combat. The most advanced sling of ancient times was one that was adapted for extra power.
This device I'm holding is called a staff sling, which is basically a sling which is attached to a long pole.
This pole gives the slinger a greater reach and therefore greater power in every throw, which made it a favorite for heavier projectiles, like primitive bombs used like mortars on ancient battlefields. But would this have been the best sling for David to have used against Goliath?
I think the idea that David could have used a staff sling